Just answering questions with Lab Tech and fiddling with a weird thing happening on the screen. As a kid, I grew up with many rifles, shotguns, and six guns, single action and double action. I found this interesting. Understanding in the old days, a percussion firearm would need a spark, some kind of flint, and of course, gunpowder. Actually, percussion firearms don't do that, those are flintlocks. Technically, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I am ranting, but in point. What's that threaded looking part on the bottom of what appears to be your cap illustration? Does that part squeeze into the firearm? Or does it screws in, actually. Also, never looked close to the hole on a gun barrel. Was hoping for a picture where cap installs mounts. Agreed, rabbit hole for sure, but I am sincere. Also, my wonderment with enough wisdom to sound stupid was what appeared to be the threads at the bottom of the caps could be a sort of multiple thread rings for a pressure squeeze fit, possible, I guess. And the copper diagram of cap casing had me confused. In fact, I would suggest you do a video on my question. Frankly, it'd be too much trouble for you. Your report on primer casing sizes was done. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, mostly because it's so early, even the alarm clocks aren't awake. Thanks. Hey, have a good day. Later. Yeah. I'm still working on getting all of the data. If anybody's curious, I've done a bunch of videos on things that are hard to find because I simply asked stupidly Google for the answer. That pretty much, actually, that kind of explains most of what I do on my channel. The other reason I did it is because I was looking up what, if any, evolution or size standards there are. And that was actually going to be the subject of the video, because if you look up every possible dimension or diameter, there's a certain minimum and maximum size for every part in any system, because of practical limits for human beings and tolerances for machinery. This is also matching, not so coincidentally, the minimum and maximum diameters for making various tooling to make things like plastic or copper tubing, drill bits, tap and die sets. There are certain mechanical limits you can't get beyond. So basically, it's not that there's some magic number to things, it's just that there's certain limits where some engineering can't be done beyond a certain point. And this is also the reason you find screw threads being made so that they have a wide range of diameters. The outer and inner diameter-ish of how deep the threads go into a side of a bolt are there because that's the slop factor. And that's why a lot of bolts or screws or nuts either have a taper to them so they jam fit, or have a rule about the surface on, let's say, the bottom of the head of a bolt or a screw being a certain shape. They're done for specific reasons that imply things won't be perfect. This is also the reason you find that firearms follow these rules as well. And it's also the reason you find out that certain tubing but not pipe diameters match many, many cartridges or bullet diameters, and others can't. For instance, 22 caliber literally does not exist on an inner diameter for a bore of anything. Not because of, again, some attempt to make sure it doesn't happen, but because it just didn't work out. It was in between sizes, and there were practical reasons for making these things. And it is kind of odd that the only piece of tubing I can find besides Schedule 160 ultra-thick 1-inch pipe, or something like that, the inner diameter for it is exactly correct for a 12 gauge. The other thing it's perfect for it is a Schedule 40, literally weakest PVC tubing. It's literally begging for some idiot to do that. But anyway, aside from PUBG, flare gun experiments later on in the year, let's move on. Go get your booster annually. Ready your papers on hand when asked. Papers, please. Someone's ranting about vaccines again. You probably think voter ID is racist, but COVID ID is awesome. I don't think COVID ID should exist. You assume things about me because you need someone to rail against. Better a straw man to attack than a real one. I can do that with my eyebrows. That makes me awesome. Anyway, protect health, not votes. Okay. Voter ID has been found to not really advantage anybody. It disadvantages some people. And we're done with it. And you have to show, without lying, that votes are fraudulently gone through and have affected outcomes. Now, there are certain elections, and I'm not talking about the freaking president. Stop obsessing. Trump lost. Get over it. Or a vote that was really close affected things like a governor race. I mean, some fairly important things. Some of the representatives from a state, it does affect things. But not that year, and not that election, and not that specific person a lot of you obsess on. Remember, the media keeps you obsessed with the false claim of a rigged election as far as the president, even though that same ballot is used to pick your local, representatives that are not representing you. And they're the ones rigging the elections, and you know damn good well it's happening. And a lot of you tacitly are accepting it because you figure somebody who would rig an election and invalidate your vote, but says what you want to hear, they couldn't possibly do something against your best interests and exploit it. Y'all a bunch of dum-dums. And then the person does anagrams, which isn't correct. It's not an anagram. It's an acronym. Certificate of Vaccination ID, COVID. Ha ha ha. And then he decides Omicron spells moronic. Okay, that's an actual anagram. And plus delta equals media control. And if we bang, splat, and twist things enough, we'll find out that it was your mom. Yes, I did a your mom joke in this video because that's a requirement when you show up here to waste my time. We have to have fun now because this is a stupid posting. Or coinciders. You have to look to man and follow cause, refuse to even look towards God. And then the person asks me to agree with them. You're righteous enough to force others to take something you take for your health, so you can feel safe. No, I'm not forcing you to a damn thing. Not forcing you to do a vaccine or anything. What I am telling people is that if you masked up and stayed away from each other and didn't, in protest of health advice, go off and deliberately spread a disease that is extremely, amicable to super spreader events, and if you guys didn't ignore the fact that it has a majority of spread caused by asymptomatic carriers, if you fuckers didn't ignore that on purpose and deliberately spread this disease, we might not be like this. But we can't really say that anymore. Yeah, I said this. We can't say that was done, because in countries where people took this very seriously, individually, because their lives depended on it and they just shut up and did what was necessary, it still spread. So we don't know that. Yes, if everyone had, in the beginning, stayed 6 feet apart and wore masks, absolutely 100% of the population, it probably wouldn't have gone this far. But not everybody knew it was spreading, and not everybody knew it was spreading within 1 month all over the planet. Again, emphasis added, within a month of the first possible case in China, it was already being found, we've now found out by testing old samples, in the populations in South and North America and in Europe. So it was already spreading. It is an extremely contagious infection. And its replication factor, not with symptoms, asymptomatic carrier factor must be bizarrely high. And no, it does not impart natural immunity. At least not enough to actually keep you from getting sick a second time and being much worse off. They made you a foot soldier. No, people like you did. I couldn't give a shit one way or another. I went through a shit ton of vaccinations. I had to do the vaccines twice for being a kid. And my immune system has always been stupid about bacterial infections. And I've actually, yes, I did get a vaccine against MRSA and Staphylococcus aureus funiculosis, and it was the, what was it called? What do they call it? The skeletal phageal version. It attacks bone tissue. It also attacks leather. Anyway, but I wouldn't require anybody to get a vaccine because it seems, intrusive. But this is a very bad virus. It kills more than 0.5% of the people who are showing symptoms, and it spreads ridiculously well. So well that we really don't know what the asymptomatic spread factor is at all, and it's too late for us to do a retro study properly. And it moved across the entire Earth within 1 month of the first case that showed symptoms that were serious enough to be hospitalized. It was already all over the planet. And it was in some really ridiculously obscure places within 2 months. We didn't have a chance. So literally at this point, everybody masking up constantly, and everybody washing their hands and staying 6 feet apart, and everybody getting vaccinated may be the only way to get this thing to either stop transmitting or get to the point that it's no longer able to hurt us. It has a tendency, we need to remember this, of being asymptomatic. It has a tendency of being a dumbed down virus that could be tamed almost. And we have to get really lucky, really lucky for it to do that. Okay, I'll just say it. This virus, because it's already in the human population, could mutate again into something much more lethal or completely asymptomatic and not bother us anymore, and then become lethal 5 years from now. Period. This thing started off being something that wouldn't hurt you or me. It only infected bats. The worst you'd get is if you went into a cave with bat shit in it. You would get sick, maybe. And there's one case, maybe, that people got really sick, but, you know, some of them survived, some died, but they weren't asymptomatic. And there's a plethora of more viruses among bats we don't know about, and other animals. And we have places like China where they have a rampant black market for the animals moving in and out, and it causes more contact. And then there's a group of humans that say, I'm going to defiantly ignore every bit of medical advice because freedom. It doesn't matter if they say they're American or whatever, or they're in another country or in our country. They just do this shit. They don't care. They want to watch the world burn, literally. And it did. And I'm not sure that they did anything. I'm not sure that any of you impudent fucks were anything more than impotent. But their entire intention for this was to defiantly tell people, any fact I'm told I will defy, even if it kills me or you. And we've all figured that out. We now know people in our lives that are like this that we can't be around. One of the rules about being a prepper or survivalist or whatever is that you do not allow people who are self-destructive within your ranks. And a lot of you are experiencing isolation because you advocated for this shit. And I'm going to explain this very clearly to you. Anybody who did that, unless I'm feeling very generous, and I will be generous with my friends if they just knock it off, a lot of you will never be allowed in anybody's web of trust again. A lot of you will not be allowed in their bubble. You won't be allowed to come near their children. It doesn't matter if the disease goes away. You've shown recklessness and stupidity, and you will be ostracized. I don't think that's fair, but I can't help myself. I have to tell some people I can't be around you because you did something on purpose you knew, because you can't lie about it anymore, would make it worse. And you did it defiantly. That's like somebody working at a gas station with you, and he decides to light the gas pump on fire just because he wants to prove that it's got good safety equipment in it. Or the idiot when you're first suiting up with some body armor who says, see, it's knife proof, and then stabs you, and then you end up in the hospital. You're the person we don't trust because you don't deserve it. And some of you are now realizing that. There's nothing you can do. You've been judged appropriately by other people, whether it was online or in reality. Nobody has to listen to you. And you're the same varieties that scream that you want, basically you agree with people making it harder for me to vote and making sure my vote gets questioned because you don't like the fucking outcome. And you don't see this as tyranny? You took the vax. You use that expression like it has power anymore. It doesn't. You already their property under law passed a few years ago, the patent of DNA. Right. Sure I am. People like you don't exist to me anymore. And you don't exist to a lot of other people. You're in a tiny little group now. Little pockets. Little bubbles. You're not trustworthy anymore. None of you are sometimes. None of us are, excuse me. But now some of you are never going to be treated as trustworthy. You should find all your social media posts and erase them. And drop the subject if you ever want to be taken seriously. Or just double down like we know you will. Goodbye.